Bitcoin is in a really fascinating, kind of tense spot right now. We're seeing these sharp price drops, then these sudden rebounds, all while we're getting confusing signals from the underlying data and this just relentless wave of institutional demand. It's a lot of noise. So in this explainer, we're going to cut through that chaos and figure out what is really driving the market.
And it all boils down to the one big question on everyone's mind. Is all this volatility just a healthy consolidation? The market just catching its breath before the next big move up? Or are we seeing the start of a much deeper correction, a really significant drop in price?
And man, the market's nerves were really put to the test when the price recently dipped below that key psychological level. That sharp move got everyone talking and for sure shook out some of the short-term players.
But at the very same time, you've got this other huge piece of the puzzle, the ETFs, the exchange-traded funds. They represent this steady, almost quiet force of institutional demand that's constantly at play in the background.
And then, to throw another wrench in the works, you've got conflicting forces like regulatory news. A single headline about some crypto bill getting stalled can send these ripples of uncertainty through the whole market, reminding everyone that, yeah, politics still plays a huge role in all of this.
But here's the thing. Underneath all that noise on the surface, you have the on-chain data. That's the transparent record of all the transactions happening on the blockchain itself. And this data often gives us a much deeper and sometimes totally contradictory view of market health compared to just looking at the price.
Okay, so let's try to put these pieces together. This is Bitcoin at a crossroads, and our job right now is to make sense of all this market noise.
The macro analyst Alex Kruger has a great way of putting it. He calls this the main battle. He says the market is deciding if Bitcoin will consolidate its role as a global macro asset. So this isn't just about the price going up or down, it's a real fight over Bitcoin's fundamental place in the entire financial system. And we're going to use this battle framework to break it all down.
So, who's fighting in this battle? Well, it's a classic showdown between two opposing forces, the bulls and the bears.
So let's break down the two camps, right? The bull case is being driven by that relentless institutional demand, rising global liquidity, and some fascinating new financial infrastructure. On the other side, the bear case is being fueled by regulatory uncertainty and, of course, people taking profits after the big run-up.
All right, let's really get into the weeds here and look at the evidence from both sides of this fight, starting with the case for the bears.
A perfect example of this bearish pressure, it happened just recently, when a really key piece of crypto legislation just stalled out in the US Congress. This single event was a stark reminder that even for a decentralized asset, government regulation can still heavily influence how the market feels.
And the market's reaction? Oh, it was instant, and it was not pretty. That news triggered a wave of selling and liquidations, injecting a whole lot of fear and volatility right back into the system. But, and this is a huge but, the price alone doesn't tell the whole story. If we actually look under the hood, at that on-chain data, we see a much more balanced picture. So, who is actually doing the selling? Well, data from Glassnode shows that the overwhelming majority of the selling pressure is coming from short-term traders. Meanwhile, the long-term holders, they're largely staying put, just holding on. And historically, that pattern suggests consolidation, not the beginning of a bear market. Okay, so that's the bear case. Now, let's flip the script and look at the bull case, which, honestly, is incredibly strong. A key factor here is what some analysts, like Arthur Hayes, call the rising tide of global liquidity.
So what on earth is global liquidity? It's actually pretty simple. Just think of it as all the money sloshing around the global financial system that's looking for a place to go. And when there's more of it, that money tends to hunt for return in scarce assets. And there are very few assets out there scarcer than Bitcoin.
And get this, here's another super powerful and often overlooked bullish signal. New infrastructure. We're now seeing really sophisticated products, like stablecoins that are backed by US Treasury bonds, being built directly on the Bitcoin network. This is huge. It shows Bitcoin is evolving from just being a speculative asset into a foundational layer for a whole new financial system.
And that brings us right back to those ETFs. Because while the daily price chart looks like a roller coaster, the flow of institutional money into these Bitcoin ETFs has been, well, remarkably steady and positive. It's this quiet accumulation happening right behind the scenes.
And you see this trend everywhere, especially with big players like MicroStrategy, who just announced another huge purchase right after that price dip. So here's the crucial point.
Every significant dip is being met with significant institutional buying power.
So, who's going to win this battle? The outcome really seems to come down to three key factors that could tip the scales either way.
So for the bulls to really take control and push Bitcoin to new all-time highs, these three conditions pretty much have to line up. Favorable global liquidity, sustained institutional demand through those ETFs, and a stable or at least predictable regulatory environment. If any one of those falters, this battle could drag on for a lot longer.
So here's the most crucial thing to remember through all of this. Volatility does not equal weakness. What it is the sign of a market in a battle of definition, a market that's fighting to decide its next big move. All this noise is really just part of the process.
So, I'll leave you with that central question. Looking at all this evidence, what do you think? Is Bitcoin getting ready for a massive new surge, or is it bracing for a major correction? The battle is definitely on.